Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well today. It is a gloomy day, so the lighting might not be as great as I want it to be, but I have all my drapes open. Today we're talking about buying your first Chanel, and I figured the classic wallet on chain would be a very good item to show you guys for comparison in terms of, comparing the leather material and the color of the hardware. So my guest item today is this beautiful wallet on chain, and it's actually my mom's wallet on chain. They're about the same age. She got it maybe shortly after me, so it's around the same year. She doesn't use it as often as I do, so I'll also talk a little bit about like wear and tear and things like that, obviously. But you guys know this is my very first, well, if you follow my channel, you would know that this is my very first piece of Chanel, and I ended up picking this in the Caviar black, and then this beautiful gold hardware. And obviously today we're not talking about like color choices, because if you're, some people are just not into black item in general, but so obviously you wouldn't be buying a black handbag to start with. But I would say a very high percentage of people who are buying their first Chanel would be picking a black SLG or black handbag. So as the title says, today we're talking about buying your first Chanel and how to decide between whether you want a caviar leather or the lambskin. How do you pick from a gold hardware versus a silver hardware? So when I wanted my first piece of Chanel, I was just turning 30, and I was like, okay, I want to add something Chanel to my collection, whether it's a handbag or SLG. And when I did my research, realizing the medium flap at the time was close to $7,000 in Canadian, I was just like, that's way too much. So I was also kind of asking the sales what's the other popular option as an entry item, and the wallet on chain was something that they suggested. And back then this was not only, but it was $2,600 or something like that plus tax. So it was still very, very expensive. I would never thought I would be buying a tiny thing like this for that amount. And obviously it took me a very, very long time to pick between the two different, leather and the hardware. So today we're gonna do some close-up shot of the two items, and then also talk about, some of the consideration and how I end up picking this one here. So I would say they're equally beautiful, and the same with the hardware. It's kind of those subtle differences that only a Chanel lover or handbag fashion lover would really, really notice. Personally, I don't feel like this whole gold or silver makes a huge difference in terms of your overall look. I know some people like to have entirely matching color jewelry with their hardware on the bag and all that. I'm not too particular about that. I try to consider, but it's more, I think, depending on the outfit that you'll be wearing for the day. I mean, today we have a rainy day, so I'm in my loungewear. I still think both of them would work. I would say the one thing about the walk is the chain is really, really long. So right now when I wear it, I do have to wrap it around the flaps to make it shorter and more kind of wearable. I find overall the strap to be a bit too long now. So let's just start with the leather option. So the two most common leather option is the caviar leather versus the lambskin. So the lambskin is the more traditional Chanel kind of handbag leather. If you look at most of the vintage, it's in the lambskin. Now the 2.55, it's in the distressed calfskins. It's a whole different type of material, which I don't think, maybe at one point they make some sort of flaps in those leather. I'm not sure. I don't feel like I've seen one, but over the years in different series they do experience with different leathers, different textures, so there are obviously more limited or special editions with different type of leather material. Like, as you know, now they have the gold skin for the 19 or iridescent leather as well, or smooth calf. They have different, a variety of leather options, but I'm just talking about in terms of the more classic and reoccurring leather options. You generally have these two as for your classic pieces, so your caviar and the lambskin. And as I said, the lambskin is more the classic option. It's the one that's been used for years. The caviar was introduced a little bit more recently, but I mean, not that recent. It's probably over 20 years now, I think, roughly, with this caviar leather. And the caviar leather has been really, really popular since it was introduced, and mainly because the reason that it's a lot more scratch resistant, because of the grainy texture on it. So, you know, it looks like little caviars. That's me imagining. I think that's why it's called caviar leather. But it does have very evident grains on them, and you know, because of it, you know, the scratch wouldn't really show. I would say though, it can still be damaged. Like my daughter did make a scratch, and it won't really go away, but it's just a lot less visible to any scratches, given the texture of the leather. I do feel like it's a little rougher too. Like when you touch it, it's a little bit more greasy, oily, versus the lambskin is definitely like soft, super soft and buttery, and like it's very, very smooth, right? Because there's no grains to the leather. Well, at least the one that my mom purchased here is very, very puffy in comparison to my caviar. I would say a lot of wok are more caviar. I've had people commenting to say my wok is a bit too flat, but this one I actually didn't even have a chance to see in the store. It was just shipped to me. I didn't know much about Chanel back then. It was beautiful, and I mean, I still think it's beautiful. I don't mind the puffiness on it because I know over time it will actually start to dimple, and I almost prefer that it would just stay more like this state if possible. So the one that my mom purchased is a teeny bit more puffier. Maybe a side angle would help. And it's just so beautiful and smooth. Like if you look against the light, the lambskin is definitely more kind of, it reflects more shine to it in a way, and in this case I think also because the quilts are a little bit more puffier, the lighting does seem to bounce off more on her piece compared to mine. And like I said, because she doesn't use it as often as I do, her piece is essentially very, very new. Like you can't really see much damage on it at all. And you know, there are very faint scratches kind of on the surface, but they're pretty small. That is not quite noticeable even against the light, I think. Again, same with her hardware condition. I would say it's, you know, there's less hairline scratches compared to mine. She's just better at keeping her things in comparison than me. Like when she does use it, she tend to be more careful than me. Anyway, and she stores it a little bit more kind of diligently. I kind of just throw this bag around. I think I mentioned in my unboxing I was using this like non-stop for 3 months for a while, and you know, because it's caviar, kind of just being very careless with it. So I think so basically that's the reason to consider is how careful are you with an item. The first reason, like I said, so if you're someone who tends to just like throw your bags around and don't want to baby them too much, and you don't you see yourself using this piece very frequently, like if you're buying a classic flap and don't plan to use it on a regular basis, then maybe you can also consider lambskin. But if you're buying something and you think you are going to be using it very often and don't want to baby it, then I think caviar is the way to go. And you've probably heard that a number of times too. But I think the one thing that people don't think about is, you know, you do really need to go and check out these two pieces in store yourself and put them on, because it does give you a very different kind of feel, I think. I just think the caviar in general is a little bit more casual versus the lambskin is just a little bit more elegant, a little bit more classic. You know, because of the delicateness of the skin, it gives you a little bit more kind of more feminine, soft touch to it or something like that. So I do suggest, if you can, to check them out in store. Another thing I would say is, you know, sometimes you have that goal or kind of a very clear idea of what you want, and if you always wanted a lambskin but only worried that it will get damaged, or you know, you're not sure if it will keep well and you worry about, you know, actually damage it. I say it's not that delicate. Like, you know, like these two are pretty much around the same time, and the lambskin is actually still being kept really, really well. Like, it is soft, yes, it is delicate, but I think you could just easily damage the caviar as well. So I think if you're careful and lambskin is really the look that you want, then I would say go for the lambskin and don't worry about it too much, because they are still designed to last and it is still leather. As long as you don't like scratch it on purpose or like just don't care for it, then I think you'll be fine. You can try to condition it. They're also kind of protectant that you can spray on top of it. Personally, I don't know how much they will help from actual like scratch and things like that. Another thing I know the walk get damage is their corners. If you bump these corners into some hard surfaces, whether it's lambskin or caviar, I think that could also easily damage the leather. But I think one thing is just be true to your heart. Like, if your heart is telling you you need to go with a lambskin because that's the one that the classic look that you've been always earning for, then just go for it. I think is not, initially I'm the same, so none of my items were in lambskin. But after I've got the vintage one, and after, you know, my mom been using this one, I can tell that it's not as, you know, as easy to damage as you would think. So just to give you guys a sense of how they look on me and different lighting, maybe that'll give you guys, it's very difficult again to just go by pictures and by videos. I think these things, it's just always the best if you're able to go check them out in person at the store. So again, like I said, because it's so long, the length that after I make one wrap around the flap, I think is perfect. So I really like that length on me. Same thing with this one here. And also the chain on this wallet on chain, because they're technically SLGs, the chain are thinner, so in comparison to like a medium classic flap. And also recently they've changed the design for their zippers, and they've changed this to a magnetic closure, which I think are good change to the design feature of the bag. But it never really bothered me the other way around, so happy with it. I brought this bag to travel with me. You know, I don't baby it, and I have to say I'm happy with the caviar option that I picked. But I think, you know, if I can pick again, and for example, if buying a mini bag or something like that, I wouldn't be afraid of going for the lambskin. So for the longest time, I've been wanting to add a mini to my collection, but because it discontinued the caviar leather, I've been kind of putting it off. But now I'm thinking maybe it's not a huge deal. So if an opportunity comes around, I might just go for it. So yeah, so that's the leather. And now in terms of hardware, I would say though, I for some reason, people seem to tend to prefer the gold hardware. I mean, there are some people who just are keen on getting all their items in the silver hardware. Some people all want it all in gold hardware, and some people are kind of both. So I have my medium flap in the silver hardware, and for different reasons. Like that one, again, it's another one that everyone asks, like, I'm getting my first classic flap, should I be getting the silver or gold? For me, it was very clear. For some reason, I just know that I wanted a medium classic flap in the silver hardware, and you know, even though there was a gold option available at the time, I just wanted the silver one, and that's what I went for. I never regret that decision. With the walk, it was the same thing. Like, I did my research, I did look at all the comparison pictures online, and I mean, like, I guess it's also the fact that it's my very first Chanel, so black and gold is just the most, it seemed to be the most classic combination. So I was like, okay, so caviar in the gold, and they had it available, so I'm like, okay, maybe it's just meant to be, and I just went for it. So when it was turn for my mom to pick, we wanted something that's completely different, because even if you get it in the lambskin, if it was the gold hardware, it will just be very, very similar. And we also noticed that the silver is also really, really shiny and really bright. It catches your eyes for sure, and it just makes the bag looks a bit more younger, I would say, and a little bit more casual as well, because the silver tone. And I have to say, for a little while, the gold tone wasn't super popular. I think, you know, the gold jewelries were kind of not the most popular. The silver, platinum is kind of the trend. And then after that, like rose gold was like a huge thing for a while. And then now I think gold is back and people are still leaning more towards the gold. But I think silver is just as pretty. Again, just go with what your heart truly wants, and if you have the option, you should go try them out in store. Another big thing that you guys can consider as well is resale value. So I would say, based on my own experience and knowledge with handbags, Caviar with the gold hardware is always a faster sell in any model, basically. Like whether you have a, you know, Caviar medium or a Caviar small, and then in the gold hardware, seem to just sell a lot quicker and seems to be more desired in the pre-larve market for sure. For a number of reasons. I think people are looking in the pre-market, they definitely want something that's durable, something that will last longer, and given that if it's Caviar, then people kind of assume that the wear on it would be a little bit more minimal. Again, that's not all entirely true. You do have to make sure you look at the picture very carefully. And then the gold hardware, again, I think people are just looking for that classic combination. So I would say in general, a gold with black and a caviar skin, a caviar leather seem to be the most best value, retain their best value for resale purpose. So again, are you buying this item thinking that you want to potentially resell at some point down the road, or you're truly just buying something you love and intend to keep it in your collection? That could be something that you can consider. But at the end of the day, like obviously when you resell, it all depends on how well you kept your item. So whether it's lambskin or caviar, it just depending on how good the condition is at the time you're planning to let it go. So I'm just saying in general, I do feel like people are more drawn towards things that are in gold hardware in the caviar leather. Another thing for your consideration would be, you know, they've discontinued the caviar and the mini and the small, the square. So, you know, all of a sudden those items, you know, the price went crazy, like through the roof because of that reason, because they're discontinued, and caviar is obviously the more durable option. And then, you know, small and mini are more meant to be like an everyday use item. So all of a sudden people could be paying like $2,000 for those and reselling them for $5,000 or so. That's something you have to consider as well. So by discontinuing the caviar leather also is giving the impression that there's more limited material to these. So that could be something that people are thinking, okay, I should get the caviar now because there's limited quantity and so on and so forth. But again, I have other lambskin items, gold skin items, like my pouch and my 19. I personally think it's just depending on how it's being treated. Sometimes if it's treated well, which is I think they're starting to do for some of the newer pieces, they are just as durable as long as you're careful with them. I don't really see an issue with them. And you know, it might be a big hype right now with the caviar, but I think eventually it might fade out. And if this is becoming, or they are launching, like I said, other type of material like gold skin or other type of leather, that may become the more main reoccurring type of material, then those might take over as being the more popular option. So some of those are things to consider. So part of me is thinking, you know, if discontinue the caviar, in some sense you have to consider, like, if I'm bringing out a caviar mini bag, people know it's from about like 5-10 years ago because they haven't launched, they haven't had those for a while. So do you want people to be able to recognize that your mini is more a vintage piece? Or do you want to go with the current trend, which is like lambskin? So if you purchase a lambskin, that would be harder for people to notice that it is a older series item. So that's something to consider as well, right? So, you know, say even if eventually they discontinue the caviar in the walk, then people would know this is from a certain period of time. Versus if they keep going with the lambskin, then it's harder to know that this is not a current piece. Those are some things you can consider. So I feel like in that sense, the lambskin has been around forever. It's just depending on how they're being treated. But I think it remains to be the most classic material, or the classic leather, for Chanel especially. So I know I'm giving you guys a lot of different information, but at the end of the day, I feel like it's best for you to go into the store and feel them and try them on yourself and make a decision. Like I said, I think the bottom line is if you do intended to use it very regularly on a like a daily basis, and you're not a very careful person like me, like I'm not a super careful person, then the Caviar would probably be a good option for you. But if you're pretty good with your items and you're, you know, like you're wanting this more classic look, then I would say the lambskin would just be as great. So yeah, or even better, I guess I should say. Anyways, this video wasn't super organized, but I think I've captured all the information I want to share with you. If you have any questions or comment, or you know, if you disagree with what I said, please do comment below. I would love to hear from you. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.